Advent, the season of dark, of quiet, of waiting. The story most often told during these weeks in December is that of Mary, a pregnant woman traveling home with her love, waiting for her baby, anticipating a whole new stage of life as a wife and mother. For millennia, Christians have been living into this story as we inch toward Christmas through this month. It's part of the Christmas or the Christian paradigm, defining these December weeks, beckoning us deeper into the dark of the season, promising joy and good cheer when Christmas comes, when we celebrate the birth of Jesus, the birth of God in the world. The entire story, pregnancy, travel, birth, visitors, a baby, the whole thing is so human, so familiar in its normalcy, so embodied as we are. Some of us get pregnant, some give birth. We all travel to some extent, all get tired, get sick, experience our bodies injured and aging. In its simplest form, this is a story of bodies. Mary was pregnant, 9 months. Her feet are swollen, her back is aching. Simple things like getting up from a sitting position are painful and complicated. She and her husband are back in their hometown, and she goes into labor. Cramps turn to contractions, cries of pain, pushing, blood and tearing, sweat, tears, breathing, squeezing people's hands while letting out primal screams. It's hard to imagine a more embodied experience than birth. And then a child, a baby boy, slimy, crying, getting air into his lungs, cold, bright, eyes closed, screaming. He's handed to his mother, also crying, a mix of joy and pain and relief. They were in a manger, meaning they were on the bottom floor of a home where the animals lived. So people usually went upstairs into the loft. There was room there. That's where people sort of lived. But when Mary and Joseph came to town, famously, there was no room upstairs, and so Mary and Joseph stayed downstairs. Now, when we were in Jordan this last spring, we got to see a village which was more than 2,000 years old. And the doorways and stone frames and sometimes the staircases still stood, letting us stand on the same ground in the same rooms as people did millennia ago. And our guide sort of casually noted as we visited one of the houses that these alcoves that we were seeing on this ground floor, that we were actually in the manger, in this house. A part of the house was called the manger. It's where animals slept and fed. And there were stairs or ladders that go to the second floor, this upper room where people stayed. So Mary and Joseph would have been downstairs when their baby was born, down in the manger. Because so many travelers had come to town, there was no room upstairs. Now, I know that Advent isn't the time to talk about the birth of Jesus, so I'm ruining the entire spirit of waiting. I know the Christians in the room are like, really? We've got a whole month, we talk about birth at the end. But see, every year we talk about anticipation, right? I get one Advent sermon and I talk about the waiting, we talk about the anticipation, and then we skip a few weeks. And we focus on the Jewish and the pagan traditions, and we land on Christmas and we sing and we celebrate, but we never dig into the theology of the story. So I am exercising a little bit of preacher privilege, and I'm using this Advent sermon to talk about Incarnation. What exactly are we waiting for? Why are we on the edge of our seats? Now, I've spoken before about the corners of truth, those particular insights that each religion of the world offers the rest of us. Religion, by definition, is how communities face mystery together, how we live into the big questions of the world. So having done that for centuries or millennia, those communities have stumbled into wisdom they can offer the rest of us, even if we don't adhere to all the tenets of their faith. Christians offer a profound truth related to the nature of humanity and what it means to be both human and divine. to demonstrate or maybe to balance for all of us. They tell us the story of Jesus' birth, right? Stories about gods abound. But stories about children, about tiny, vulnerable babies who are also divine, that's a gift being offered to us, a very unusual insight. The image of Jesus as a baby is one of the most profound spiritual images offered by any of the world's religions. That's a very big statement, so I'm going to explain. Ignoring the infinite ways Jesus has been painted or drawn or sculpted as a child king, as an infant idol with an adult gaze and halo, I'm talking about the actual image of a baby, a real infant, tiny, no language, very little sight at first. Sounds are too loud. Crying is the primary mode of communication. Eating, pooping, sleeping, no way to move around. Rolling from your front to your back is a big deal. Then crawling, walking, holding onto a table, a few independent steps. It's some time before that child can successfully get food into his mouth on his own. This is God. I'm going to say that again because it's mind-blowing. This is God. What a profound truth. What a theological offering given to us through this Christian story. This is God, the baby, the one whose diapers his grandmother changed, the one who used his tiny hand to grab his grandfather's finger for balance, the one who is washed and fed and rocked and scolded. This is God. The idea that Jesus, a human being, was God, was dismissed as part of our original Unitarian founding. I've preached on this history before, and if you're interested, I'll preach on it again. But let me just give you a very quick reminder. There was a debate after Jesus died about whether he was God, and because of a variety of political forces, it was decided that the doctrine would include this God-man, fully human and fully divine. Plenty of people believed it, and even those who didn't or weren't really sure, they understood that in a Greco-Roman world with plenty of other god-men in the mythology, this is possibly the path of least resistance. So the Council of Nicaea declared it doctrine in 325. The controversy lived on, and it is again determined, Council of Chalcedon 451, Jesus is one being, two natures. As finalist church leaders thought they were being, the question remained. Having added the Holy Spirit, the official doctrine was a Trinitarian God, one God, three faces. It was complicated and debated and embraced and dismissed through history, including by our own Unitarian forebears in Europe. In the early part of the 19th century, William Ellery Channing formally preached on Unitarian theology, recognizing that Trinitarianism didn't prioritize reason, which would clearly recognize Jesus as human, a truly great human and model for other humans, no more God than anyone else. Letting go of all the supernatural implications, Channing and the Unitarians who went after him removed Jesus from the realm of a deity, which makes total sense, right? It's completely reasonable. But with that declaration, we lost the brilliance, the genius, the earth-shattering insight that is the core of the Christian offering. Jesus was God. Jesus, that tiny, newborn, fragile, vulnerable, dependent baby, born to a young woman on the ground floor of an ancient home surrounded by sheep and camels, was God. So I'd like to suggest that we got sidetracked with the original Unitarian Declaration and forgot that the theology of Jesus' divinity didn't elevate one man as much as it elevated all of us. We got distracted by one story, his story, and forgot that it's all our stories. We are all born. We are all dependent. We are all human. Christianity became a cult of one instead of a cult of all. While theologians throughout history were trying to capture Jesus, to enlarge him, they forgot that we are all equally human, equally divine. Jesus wasn't the only one. He was one of the people who became awake to the magnificence of what it means to be alive. He lived communally. He loved unconditionally. He valued life over material things, valued health over money, believed we are here to break ourselves open and pour ourselves out in service to each other. Those early Unitarians rejected the idea that Jesus was God, claiming that there is only one God. They upheld Jesus as a role model, a good person who had a strong and necessary message about how we treat each other. They declared a humanist Christianity that focused on serving the poor and feeding the hungry and healing the sick and visiting the imprisoned and generally caring for and being responsible to each other. There was no reason to get involved with complicated Trinitarian theologies or questions about salvation after life, and there's certainly enough going on here to keep us busy without having to question things for which we'll never know the answers. And this made sense. It made sense to thousands of people, and we are all here to prove it. But rejecting that insight, removing Jesus from the realm of incarnate God, of embodied God, separated divinity from humanity for all of us. And we've done it in the natural world too, removing God from the body of earth and sending God into a realm far, far away, separated from our embodiedness. All of earth became a collection of objects rather than a communion of subjects. We have made it our habit to remove or deny divinity, separating it from the bodies of our lives. Russian soldiers have been executing Ukrainian civilians and dropping their bodies into mass graves. Iranian women are being imprisoned for as little as letting a lock of hair show. Unhoused Americans are sleeping and starving on city streets across the country. China is enslaving Uyghurs in an attempt to convert them from their Muslim faith. We don't do that when we see the face of God in each other's eyes. When I know that you are God, that you are part of the divine mystery, I do not let you starve. I do not let you suffer at my hand. I do not forget you, neglect you, or abandon you. And when I know God is tiny, fragile, embodied, and becoming like the rest of us, I know I'm responsible for being God's hands, God's eyes, God's feet. I know I am called to living a life of partnership with love. The divine spirit is embodied in each of us. Each of us is born, each of us as children, as teenagers, as young adults, as reproductive parents, as working people, as aging people. We are divine in our wrinkled skin and graying or thinning hair, our aching knees and failing sight. Waiting for the birth of God is waiting for us to know that God is here in each of us, that hope is here because we are here. There is joy already alive. Advent is the time for waiting, but maybe it's time for us to stop waiting and wake up to the magnificence of who we are, so fully human, so fully divine. We are waiting for each of us to become awake. We tell the story year after year, and we keep thinking it's someone else's story. Mary and her baby 2,000 years ago, but it's our story. It's the story of humans who are born, who are vulnerable, who are dependent. It's the story of God who is born, vulnerable, and dependent. It's the story of loving so well and so much. People celebrate your birth every year forever. It's the story of learning how to love that well, of being that love for each other. Advent is our time to be born into our magnificence and to see that same divine spirit in the eyes of everyone around us, no matter how broken or frightened or angry or lost they are, because they are God and we are God. And until we all know that, we wait.